Rise of the Floodborn has officially released, and people from all over the world have begun exploring the potential of the new cards. But the question still remains, what will be the best deck in Lorcana? Today I bring to you my top 5 picks for what I believe will likely be the #1 deck in the Floodborn meta. There are many variations to each of these decks, and only time and testing will determine which of these decks is truly the best in the world. And before we dive in, I'd like to just take a moment to thank all of my subscribers for the continued love and support you have all shown me with the views, likes, and shares across all of my daily Lorcana gameplay videos. You guys are absolute rock stars, and if you're new to the channel, I would love to invite all of you to subscribe and join me on this wild journey as we play new and interesting Lorcana decks each and every day. Coming in at number 5 is the Emerald and Steel deck. Emerald has seen a boon in the discard mechanic with cards that reward you for doing so, like Prince John. This character rewards you for making your opponent discard by letting you draw a card. This ability both attacks your opponent's hand and resources, but also keeps your hand full, allowing you to acquire all the answers you need to make your opponent's life extra difficult. In addition to that, Prince John has the Ward ability, which makes him especially difficult to deal with, and in the late game, when you're ready to close things out, he can quest for 2. The discard mechanic works well with Still, as it leans on the more cost-effective removal to help keep the board under control while you devastate your opponent's hand. In fact, this version I have for you today is a fairly aggressive Still inclusion with Captain Hook and Prince Eric to help maintain the board state early game, buying you time to get Prince John in play for card advantage, and moving into Hypnotize, Sudden Chill, Daisy Duck, and Lucifer, all of which force your opponent to relinquish cards from hand and quickly putting them in top deck mode, a notoriously difficult position to win games from. Where this deck struggles is with consistency. If you fail to find Prince John in your opening hand or in the first couple of draws, then you are likely to run out of resources just as quickly as your opponent, and in many cases, much faster. So the inclusion of Beast, Tragic Hero, is a welcomed one. He may be expensive, but once he's in play, he can help you to recover your position and stabilize. But the otherwise lack of card draw in this deck means it can stall pretty quickly, so you really need that Prince John. Moving on to my number 4 pick, we have the Amber and Amethyst aggro deck. You'll find a common theme to many of the decks in today's meta, in that there are several variations to each, but one thing many of the decks have in common is the need to set up a card draw engine, whether that's with the Popsicle and Harem combo, or getting characters in play who can sing friends on the other side. So, this deck aims to take advantage of that natural slow pace by running cards like Lilo Making a Wish and Maleficent Biding Her Time, 2 1-drop characters that each quest for 2. Either of these characters, followed up by a number of different plays, creates a challenging, fast-paced race for our opponents. We can either turn 2 play 2 or more of these characters, giving us 3 in play, threatening a 6th lore quest, or play more defensively with Simba, Protective Cub, who has the Bodyguard ability and will buy us more quests with our 1-drops. Or we can quest with the 1-drop and bounce them safely back into our hand with Madam Mim's Snake. As our most expensive card is only 4 ink, sometimes 6 if we can't shift the Rockstar, we can build up our inkwell to 6 or 7 and quickly flood the board with questing characters. The goal here is to get ourselves up to 15, 16, or even 17 lore before our opponent can stabilize the board. Then take advantage of the late game consequence of banish my character or lose the game, a state that results from playing a character who automatically represents lethal if it can't be dealt with. The resiliency this deck has to more controlling decks is equally impressive when you consider Merlin Goat and all the bouncing we can do with the 2 Madam Mim variants. Sometimes simply playing a Banish Me Now character isn't enough when our opponent excels at targeted removal. This is where the Merlin Goat comes in handy. As he enters play, he automatically gains us 1 lore, and again when he leaves play. This can build up to many lore gained by the Goat simply by playing him and bouncing him back to our hand repeatedly, and is a clever way to avoid targeted removal. Up next is my number 3 deck, and it could honestly be my number 2. It's the ever popular Sapphire and Ruby items deck. With the release of Hiram Flaversham Toymaker and the powerful Popsicle item card, Sapphire has leaped its way right up into being one of the best card draw colors in Lorcana. This makes it go hand in hand with the powerful removal you can find in Ruby. As you draw cards, you find the pieces you need to control the board, and as the board falls under control, you build up your questers and crawl your way to victory. This is a similar strategy to the first chapter's Amethyst and Ruby deck. Draw cards, control the board. But unlike the previous meta's card draw ability, Sapphire's engine is much more powerful. Hiram gets instant value when you play him, drawing you 2 cards as he destroys one of your items. Then, with Nick Wilde and Tamatoa, you can keep retrieving your items from the discard pile and replaying them, fueling Hiram to draw you more and more cards. With that engine online, you'll never run out of answers for your opponent's threats, and Maui, Lady Tremaine, Maleficent, and Hades can remove a slew of problem characters while threatening to win the game. And this deck has a lot of flexibility with cards like Teeth and Ambitions. You can spot remove problem aggro characters quickly while ramping with Fishbone Quill and building up towards a Be Prepared. Once you've ran through your opponent's resources while never truly running out of your own, the game will quickly fall in your favor and you clear things up and quest for the victory. The consistency and recoverability of this deck also gives it an astounding edge. If your characters are ever dealt with, it doesn't take long to rebuild your hand with Hiram and your board thanks to Fishbone Quill's inking. I've played many games where I felt I had this deck under control, only for them to refill their hand and replay huge threats on the very next turn. My number 2 deck, only edging out by a sliver, is the brand new Amber and Steel Songs deck. Steel Song was a popular deck in the first chapter, and while it took a while to be developed and explored, it quickly swept the meta, and this time is no different. We have a bunch of new, powerful cards that make songs so much more interesting. First up is the brand new Cinderella Ballroom Sensation. This is a 1-cost, inkable character with 1/2 power and toughness, who quests for 1 and has the Singer 3 ability. On its own, this character is okay. Actually, not much to write home about, but with 3 cards in particular in this new set, Cinderella has a lot to say. We want to play Cinderella on turn 1 with one exception, which we'll get back to in a moment. On turn 2, she can now sing one of 3 songs, only 2 of which will do anything, and only one of those is the superior option. Let the Storm Rage On. This song will deal 2 damage to a chosen character, usually banishing whatever your opponent has played on their turn 1, and then it draws you a card. This is very strong tempo. On other turns, she can sing Strength of a Raging Fire and World's Greatest Criminal Mind to clear out problem characters, and where she really shines is with the new Cinderella Stouthearted, a 5/5 who can shift in at 5, boasting a tough Resist 2 and quests for 3. What makes this big Cinderella interesting is her ability, the Singing Sword, which allows her to challenge readied characters provided you've sung a song on your turn. She can tear through most threats and in a lot of cases doesn't take any damage. She can prevent your opponent from playing characters that would otherwise win them the game by being able to attack them before they can quest. She's an absolute powerhouse. But let's take a moment and explore this deck's other really powerful strategy, the Queen. We're running both Regal Monarch and Commanding Presence. This is the alternative game plan to Cinderella. Turn 1, we can choose to play the Queen for 1 ink and move into our turn 2, shifting the Queen Commanding Presence, and she's extra strong. She can either quest for 2 immediately, or she provides strong removal in that her questing can weaken a character and make another much stronger, allowing you to pick off your opponent's threats while keeping your own character safe. But where the Queen gets really interesting is that she's a 5 ink character who shifts out on turn 2, meaning she can sing every song in the deck, including A Whole New World. One thing that can really throw a wrench in your opponent's game plan is effectively taking away their mulligan. They started the game by trying to sculpt a hand that can synergize and compete, and you can take all of that away from them, possibly even sticking them with a hand full of unplayables for many turns. This is a brutal way to lock your opponent out of the game early on. It won't always be the most devastating play, but it's always a good play. Outside of our key cards, we're running a bunch of support cards to help smooth out the games where we can't get the synergies right away. Stitch New Dog and Simba Protective Cub gives us flexibility in the early turns by allowing us to trade or quest. Rapunzel occasionally comes down and draws us cards and heals our characters when we need them, and the new Beast Tragic Hero is here to give us the extra card draw each turn. Ultimately, we can shift and adapt to many playstyles thanks to the card draw and board control. Shifting into Stitch Rockstar and drawing extra cards off him can allow us to go wide at a moment's notice. Grab Your Swords can make trading more profitable or even make it safe for us to quest and get ahead on the board, and 4 copies of Ariel Spectacular Singer ensures we always have songs close by to start closing things down for our victory. And for my number 1 pick for the top deck in the meta, I'm sure to no one's surprise, is the Bounce Amethyst and Ruby Control deck. This deck is strong, it's consistent, and it really only aims to do one thing while controlling the board: bounce our characters for lore advantage. We're running characters like Olaf and Minnie Mouse because they are both inkable and only cost 1 to play. In addition to that, they have 3 willpower, which means they won't die to let the storm rage on or fire the cannons, meaning they will likely survive to turn 2, where they can quest and be bounced back into our hand by Madam Mim's Snake, a 3/3 character who often forces our opponent to slow down. From here, depending on what we have in hand and what our opponent is doing, we can play LeFou, readying Snake, who can attack 2 times to clear the board, or play Arthur to threaten early, powerful bounce questing, Elsa to keep our opponent's characters exerted and vulnerable to our Snake, or Madam Mim Fox. Our worst play is likely Maleficent on 3 to draw a card, and that by no means is a bad play for turn 3. It only gets worse for our opponent from this point forward because they will be trying to stabilize the board while we're refilling our hand with cards like Maleficent, Merlin Rabbit, or preferably Friends on the Other Side. We can even apply more pressure with Teeth and Ambitions, taking 2 damage to our Olaf or Minnie and banishing a character of our opponent's. Then quest with the damaged character, quest with Arthur, bounce the damaged character, and replay them, effectively healing them, readying them, and taking the lead on the board and jumping ahead on lore. It's a powerful, synergistic removal song. By this time, we're getting up to our 5, 6, and 7 ink, and our opponent may have begun to stabilize by this point. And that's where our Mauis and Lady Tremaines begin to shine. As our opponent plays characters to quest or attack our smaller characters, Maui can clean things up, followed by Lady Tremaine's ability to make them sacrifice one of their characters. We can deal with ward and resist fairly well. From here, the game is either entirely ours, the opponent has managed to keep a full hand, or it's a control mirror match. Depending on what kind of game it is, we're likely way ahead on lore and simply waiting for our opponents to make a move. With Elsa, Spirit of Winter, we can easily buy us the extra turns we need to grab victory, or Maleficent Monstrous Dragon to maintain pressure. And if everything has somehow fallen apart due to bad draws or unlucky plays, we can always stabilize the game ourselves with a Be Prepared. This deck is wildly flexible and aggro enough in the early game that it's near impossible to beat with a strong opening hand. The greatest weakness, in my opinion, however, comes down to the player piloting the deck. You need to be able to read your opponent and make strategic predictions about what they're planning on doing. Paying attention to the cards being inked and played in the opening turns can tell you a lot as well. You don't want to blindly play your characters and stumble into a trap. But that's it. Those are my top 5 meta decks coming out of November and beginning December. I play Lorcana every single day, and I've seen many variations of each of these decks, and it is only my opinion that these are the top 5, as they are the ones that historically have absolutely destroyed me, or taken me to many victories. I upload a brand new video every single day playing a brand new deck. If you enjoyed this content, please let me know by clicking the subscribe button and joining me on my daily adventures as we climb the ranked ladder. That's gonna do it for me today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.